to Trumpet of God Ministries, a voice of distinction, led by visionary leader Apostle Charlene Glover, teaching the uncompromising, transforming, life-giving Word of God, equipping you with apostolic truth, prophetic insight, and progressive revelation. Your trusted source when truth matters.
Shalom and welcome to Trumpet of God Ministries Voice of Distinction podcast. I'm Charlene Glover, the Apostolic Visionary Leader, and it's a pleasure to have you join with us this evening. In recognition of Black History Month, which began the first of this month, we're going to adjust our normal teaching broadcast, and we're going to focus on celebrating Black leaders, legends, and legacies throughout the month of February on Wednesday in our live stream podcast. Now, I'm going to return to my teaching, The Signs of the Times, Abandoning the Truth, in my Sunday podcast. But on Wednesdays for the month of February, we're going to be celebrating and highlighting Black greats and the history of many Black great people, legends in our heritage. So, I have a couple of young ladies that are my special guests for the introduction of the Black History program. And because we've had such controversy and such, chaos around American Black history, we decided that we wanted to highlight and celebrate and present to some of you and maybe to others, remind you of the many, many wonderful contributions that African Americans, that Blacks have made to American society and globally. So, and many of their contributions are undeniably rich in our heritage and in our American history. So, I want to bring to our screen in a moment Miss Alana Milton and Miss Trinity Mills. Welcome and thank you for joining with me in our first Black History podcast. Alana and Trinity, let me pray and then I'm going to have you introduce yourselves. Is that okay?
Yes.
So, Father God, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to celebrate Black history. You created every human being in your image and in your likeness. And because of that, we are all worthful, valuable, and necessary and significant to this life. So I pray that as we celebrate Black history and we celebrate those that have made significant contributions to justice and the well-being of all people, and in particularly Black people, Lord, that hearts would be inspired, that people would be reminded of the heritage in which we come from, and they would also celebrate and engage, get involved. So help us to hear the wonderful truths about Black history and Black people, and help us, Lord, as Christians to recognize, although all people are important to you, we too have a special place in this time. In Jesus' name, anoint us to encourage the hearts of the listeners. Amen. All right, so our theme is celebrating Black leaders and legends and legacies. And to kick us off, I have two beautiful princes, Miss Alana Milton and Miss Trinity Mills, who's going to be with me throughout the month. And I've had a wonderful opportunity to pastor Alana for all 20 years of her life. She was literally born in our ministry, and Miss Trinity and her family have been a part of our ministry over the past 10 plus years. And so I've had the wonderful opportunity of being able to shape, teach, and equip them as they're moving forward in their destinies. So why don't I have you, Miss Alana, if you will just give an introduction of yourself and share with the audience kind of who you are and your passion, and then we will have Miss Trinity come on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alana Milton. I am a 20-year-old senior at Albany State University studying political science with the aspirations of becoming a civil rights attorney. I do crafting and making press-on nails, and I'm excited to be here with you all tonight.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. What about you, Miss Trinity? Would you like to say hello to our audience and share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Hello, my name is Trinity Mills. I'm a high school junior I am attending Early County High School currently. I am going after my high school diploma and hopefully will be going after my culinary degree to hopefully one day become a chef and incorporate multiple cultures into the foods that I create. I will
Okay.
hopefully love to see everyone come back every Wednesday this month to hear about different things in Black history because we have plenty to say and there's plenty to hear.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me just reiterate Trinity's invite to you before we get started. Why don't you encourage your family, your friends, and students to join us as we celebrate Black History this month and commemorate Black leaders, legends, and legacies. And oftentimes, when people think about Black history, they automatically think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and perhaps even Rosa Parks, and rightfully so, because they were major contributors to the well-being of citizens in our society. But and no doubt their contribution still lives on. But there's so many other Black leaders and legends whose contributions have bettered the American way of life as well as globally. And so throughout the month, we're going to highlight some of those history makers. Um, as we're celebrating and as we're being reminded and as we're being inspired to engage. Alana, why don't you start us off by sharing what does Black history mean to you?
When I think about Black history, it goes right in line with our theme celebrating Black leaders, legends, and legacies. Because most of the time, when discussing Black history, we always think about things that people in our past have done. But Black history is right now, today for us. So you could have done something yesterday, in 20 years, someone will be talking about you being in our Black history. Also, you have to think about what is a leader? A leader is someone who sees a problem and then takes it and creates a solution to it, and a legacy, just moving on and bringing apart what you've done to be a part of today. So you have to have that line in line with our Black history and celebrate those leaders because you may be a leader 20, 30 years from now.
Outstanding. And you are one of those 20, 30-year leaders from now. You're already an emerging leader, but we'll be talking about your greatness 20, 30 years from now. How about that?
Yes.
Okay. What about you, Miss Trinity? Black history, what does it mean to you?
Well, to me, Black history is just a matter of knowing where you come from, so knowing where you could potentially go in the future. Because seemingly with young people today, we think that Black history is in the past and is something to be looked at and admired and left alone, rather than seen as something that is well and alive today, because history is always in the making and we can't ignore our history and then be able to build upon it. We need to see what those that came before us have done so that we can improve upon it and create even more history for those that come after us.
Awesome, awesome. So, with that being said, Alana, I guess as we look at those who have made positive contributions in our society, American history, Black history is American history. We have a legacy of many that have gone before us, but we're also, we have people before us. As Trinity said, history is always in the making. So, based on society and what's going on now, we want to constantly keep before us those of our heritage and those that are presently amongst us so that we don't allow our history and our place of marking in society to be diminished by anyone else. Any thoughts about that?
Yes, ma'am. So thinking about our Black history, I thought it was very important to go back and look in our founding documents. More importantly, the 14th and the 15th Amendment, because as Black people, those were very influential for our lives. So I'll take a few seconds just to reiterate the 14th Amendment. That was a landmark legislation that was passed in 1866 and ratified in 1868. It granted citizenship to all born and naturalized in the United States, and formerly enslaved people, it gave them equal rights to protection under the laws and extended the Bill of Rights to all states. So also it engaged insurrection. It banned those who engaged in an insurrection from holding any seat in office without approval of 2/3 from the House and the Senate. And it granted Congress the power to enforce these laws. So if you think about the 14th Amendment, people had rights, but the black people didn't, and that gave us the stand to have our rights. But rights aren't important to you if you don't know them. So you need to make sure you're aware of what your rights are, what your laws say, and how they work for you. You have to know your state, local, and federal laws.
Oh, okay, so let's go back for a moment. The 14th Amendment was a landmark legislation that was passed by the Senate in 1866 and ratified in 1868, and it granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, including those who were formerly slaves, and proved all citizens, listen to this, and proved all citizens with equal protection under the law, extending the Bill of Rights to all the states. So that means that if we don't understand that, what we're fighting for today has already been established and ratified and should be followed. If people are ignorant of that, then it suggests that we're fighting for something that is already the law. Is that right? And
Right.
if we're ignorant of the laws, then people will take advantage of us. And we think that we're trying to fight to earn something when really what we're trying to do is establish ourselves to preserve what has already been given as a law, ratified as a law. Okay, so you said something that's very, very key, that if we have laws, but we're ignorant of the laws, then they can use our ignorance as a weapon against us and defeat or restrict us from literally living in the liberties that were granted for us. Is that right?
That's correct.
So it's important to know what the documents say, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the amendments to the Constitution, because the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and I know, Trinity, you're going to talk about the 15th Amendment in a moment, but literally those are laws that are established hundreds of years ago that we should be complying with, and that should be to our benefit as Black people. But if we don't know that, and if we vote people in who have another intention and they know that their voters are ignorant of the laws, then they can make changes, or they can take advantage of our lack of understanding, our lack of knowledge, or our ignorance. Is that right?
Correct. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
good. So you said that we need to be informed about what at every level. What are those levels of laws again?
So we have local laws, you also have state laws, and then you have your federal laws.
Okay, so it's important because sometimes we know more about what's pronounced more, which is in the federal law, but we need to know at every level what laws apply to us as citizens and what our rights and privileges are, and also what those restrictions are. So, Alana, I know you have some resources that you want to share. I'll let you share that, and then we'll segue to Miss Trinity.
Yes, ma'am. So to find your state laws, you can go on findlaw.com, select your state, and it will give you a list of laws. And then to find your federal laws, you can go to govinfo.gov. They can be ordered from your Senate or House document room or in their library. And we will also post these to our social media pages as well, so you have access to the websites.
Okay, good. So our goal is to educate, and we're going to make resources throughout the month available so people will have at their fingertip information that we'll be sharing. Is that right?
Right.
Great, great. Well, Trinity, what do you want to highlight in our kickoff for Black History Month? What's important for our listeners to know?
Well, I think one of the main places to start with what you can do in your state or just in general in your country is to know what you're allowed to do based off of the law. And this is included in the 15th Amendment of the Constitution. The 15th Amendment was the amendment that gave all people the right to vote, all men the right to vote, based no matter race, color, or previous condition of servitude, which meant that Black and white men could vote. Women were not yet allowed to vote, but this was a major step up, allowing former slaves, to be able to have an influence in their laws and people that have controlled the government.
Okay, okay. So women, and we'll talk maybe in another segment about the Women's Suffrage Act and how women came to vote many years later. But nonetheless, this was major because under the 15th Amendment of the Constitution, former slave men, enslaved men, were granted the right to vote. And I wonder, is that reflected in society today when we look at men voting? Do they recognize that this was landmark and that we should be, our men should be some of the first ones at the ballot box?
I don't think many people realize how much of a privilege it is to be allowed to vote currently, especially as hard as those that came before us fought for the opportunity to vote. um I feel like we as a society should take more pride in the fact that we get to influence who controls the votes and who controls what we're allowed to do and be seen as from the rest of the world and for in our country.
Excellent, excellent. Say that again, because voting is not about just casting a ballot. It's making a selection. It is intentionally choosing who is going to be your representative. Why don't you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, ma'am. So you have representatives on every level of government, local, state, and federal. These people you vote for the person that has a platform that agrees with either your beliefs or your political standing. And they get to make the decisions for on behalf of you in government in whichever position that they are in.
Okay.
So you vote for those that you would agree with so that when they go and make decisions for you, you are happy with the decisions that they make. You're not upset that they didn't do the things that you wanted because you put them in office. So if you don't vote, you don't have a say, and you didn't try to have a say about who was in office to vote to put laws in place on your behalf.
Excellent, excellent. So voting is really about selecting who you want to represent you, who you want to be your voice, who you want to make decisions about how the quality of life that you live and the influence in your community, all the way up to the federal level and back down to your street, to your local address. And if we don't vote, we shouldn't complain.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So, what else do you want to share with us about the 15th Amendment? We've still got quite a bit of time, so we'll go back and forth. But what else would you like to share? What about the civic process? When we do not participate in the civic process, we just talked about the fact that you lose that opportunity. But what if young people were trained at your age as a high schooler, Alana's age as a college student, to get involved in the civic process and understand that? Because what happens, I think, is oftentimes we're not taught that in our homes as young people. So we grow up as adults and we are also disconnected from the reality that there is a process of life that's happening every day on your behalf and directly and indirectly affecting you. Because in our homes, that's not something we talk about. So what is it that we could do to stir up young people, your peers, to be able to recognize that you don't wait until you're an adult and you can vote. You start learning about the civic process now.
Well, one thing that we could acknowledge about it is just to make it a basic and regular conversation to have between parents and their children. Because once your child is no longer a child and they are a young adult, you wouldn't want them to come to you for everything that you thought they should already know because you haven't taught them that. And that's not bad parenting on your part, but society hasn't shown or a way to, well, not shown a way, but society hasn't made it a forefront showing that you need to make your children aware of the different things that they could be a part of, such as voting, going to even if you take your child to go vote with you, show them what the ballot looks like and show them who is on it and what they represent so that they know how you're voting, why you're voting that way, so that once they're able to vote and old enough to vote, that they can make the decision for themselves and know what to do.
Excellent. And they would understand the significance of being engaged in the civic process, even as a young person, because whatever we learn in our early years are many times the habits and the principles that we continue to live out in our young adult and in our seasoned life. And so having opportunities at home to have those discussions, looking at documentaries and information that help us understand the significance of that is important. What about Alana, the term freedom is not free? What does that mean to you?
To me, freedom is not free. Anything worth having is worth fighting for. So if you think back, since we're talking about Black history, they fought for us to have the ability to be free. They fought for us to have the ability to vote. So that goes back to nothing worth having is free. So if you don't fight for what you want, you don't fight for the people you want in office, for the people who have the same views and stance as you're just sitting in the back taking what anybody gives you, and that's not the best life you could be living.
Okay, very good. What about you, Trinity? The phrase educate to emancipate. What does that mean?
To me, that phrase means that you have to understand where and why things are happening and what they come from so that you can free yourself from other people's ideas that they try to place on you. Especially in like today's society, most media sources have are mainly opinions of anyone, whoever writes it, whoever owns the station or is the editor of the information. That is someone else's opinion. So unless you know what the actual law says or the actual rules are, you can be influenced by anyone else's opinion. So as soon as you understand what the actual law says and the real rules are, you can make your own decisions and free yourself from other people's.
Great, great. So when we talk about the way that's been paid forward for us by our history makers, our Black leaders and legends, what is it that we must do to keep moving forward? How do we continue to honor those that did pay for many of our laws that we're living today, the Civil Rights Law, the Voting Rights Act? How do we continue to honor their life and their legacy in current day? How do we do that?
Well, one way we could do that is taking advantage of the things that they fought so hard to earn, like taking part in the voting process and being able to state your opinion or use the court of law to get your point across and establish that you were either like if you were mishandled, you have a right to speak up against it. You don't have to only sit and take it because that's one thing that was tried to be forced upon them and they fought against it and they made the way so that we don't have to just sit back and let something happen. We can take advantage of what they've done for us and fight back and use what we know now from what they've done and be able to create better lives for ourselves and our potential children one day.
Excellent, excellent. So, Alana, it would be a slap in the face if we think about all of those great leaders that have come before us and paved the way forward for us, that if we just say, well, my vote don't count, my voice don't count, it doesn't really matter, my opinion doesn't matter, what I do is so minute and small, I'm just insignificant and it won't matter. What would you say to that individual who has that wrong thinking pattern of I just don't matter, my voice doesn't matter, what I do or say, nobody cares? How do you get them to see that everyone has to reach one to make a huge difference?
The first thing I would let them know is your vote is your voice. That is the way you get what you want across the table. As well as thinking, like Trinity said, going back into the home. Voting conversation starts at home. So your parents, if they're not talking about voting, maybe you can talk to your parents about voting. All it takes is one person to talk to another person, encourage them to spread the word about something, to start a conversation that's a chain reaction to where everyone's speaking about voting. And then once everyone is taking a part in voting and having that voice, then we can see some real change.
Excellent, excellent. Trinity, if we have the opportunity to do a social media blitz about young people standing on the shoulders of our legacy leaders in Black history, what would be your message to all of those that are on social media, TikTok, and what would be your emphasis to them about they are called, it's upon us, and they are called for such a time as this to also be a history maker, to also pay the way forward for those that are coming behind them in their generation and those that are coming behind your generation? What would you say to them? What would be your campaign?
I believe that the main thing that us as young adults and children need to understand is that we do have a voice and it's never going to be silenced. As long as the Lord gave us this voice, we can use it. Now, we can use it in many different ways, but in the current systems that we have in place, we can use it through our legal system and through our different outlets and different social medias. We are the social media generation. We probably knew what a camera was before we knew what a real textbook was. But if we use the things that we know and that we've grown up with, we can get our voices out there and let others know how we feel about the things that we know. And if we're educated about what we're speaking about, then we can make real change. And then we can use that to get the people that we want that would represent us properly in office to then better society as a whole.
Outstanding. Alana, do you have anything you want to contribute to that?
Yes, being that we are the social media generation, it's much easier to get a word out. And especially if you're talking about something that people care about and that's going to educate people, people will take that information and run with it. So that goes back to reaching out to your friends. You can post something on social media where you might have told somebody and maybe 3 people heard you. And you can post it and 20 people might see it, 30 people might see it. So take what you have and use it to your advantage, because years ago, all they had was their word of mouth. Now I can put something on social media and someone in Africa could see it. So you never know who's watching, who's listening to what you say. So use what you have to your advantage to make an impact.
Excellent, excellent. Trinity, Alana has a sign, and I have one that says Black Voters Matter. Look into your camera and tell that person that has never voted before, they're old enough to vote, they've never voted before, and they're not sure because they're listening to a lot of wrong information and disinformation on social media, and convince them that their voice is necessary and their vote is essential.
Well, other person on the other side of this screen, God gave you your voice for a reason. And God put things in place and put things out there for you to be able to find them for yourself and be able to go out and speak based off of what they say towards what you would like to happen. No one else can say what you want for you but you. God gave you your voice for a reason. Now, whether you choose to use it or not is up to you. But if you want to truly be represented properly in society, you'll never know unless you actually try and actually put your voice out there so that others know.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Alana, think about this. We say that government is of the people, for by the people, of the people, and for the people. I may have not said that quite right, but in other words, it should be representative of the people. We should be engaged, and what happens should be a representation of the people, not just powerful, but of the people, the citizens overall. With that being said, what would we need to do? What would African Americans, what would Black people need to do to really call attention to the fact that we're not properly represented and that we are significant, and we are significant in our contribution in American history, that we deserve a place to be respected and for the dignity of who we are as a people and as a nation of people in the United States of America? What is it that you would say to say, listen, I need to be represented and people like me need to be represented, and away with this nonsense?
I think the first thing I would say is just look into everything that we use in everyday life that's been contributed to by an African American. You have no clue how much you use every day that someone that you didn't know was black made it for you. So, being that we have all these contributions to society, being that we have all these great ideas, why can't we have a great idea to support in our House, Congress, or Senate, or even presidential, local, federal levels? So, being that we have these contributions, we have a voice and we have an impact to make. We just have to have the people who can take the step to be in those places. Think about yourself 30, 40 years from now. Would you want to tell your children you were a senator, a House rep, the president, your local mayor, anything like that? So we have a voice. We just have to be able to find it. We have to be able to use it and know we are powerful enough to use it.
Okay, and so you are of age to vote. You'll be 21 in a few weeks, in a couple of more weeks, or what have you. And so, as someone who is very, very interested in civil law and human rights and civil rights, or what have you, your aspirations as an attorney is to be a voice, to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves and represent those who have been marginalized. So what if there was a group of like-minded, which there are, like-minded young African-American emerging leaders who says that we're not going to wait to finish college and start our careers, but we're going to become activists and advocates right now, that we're going to start teaching people that your voice matters and that you have a right to have people properly speak on your behalf and serve on your behalf. What would you say to those young aspiring attorneys that are waiting to graduate and start their legal career after they pass the bar? That's too much time gone by. What can you do right now?
I would say take the step today. If you see an injustice, speak up about it. If you see somebody who's being treated wrongly, speak up, because you never know what your voice could do for that person as well as how you could help them. You don't have to wait till you finish school, pass the bar. Do something now. All you have to do is take that next step and you can be one of the greats because you didn't wait until you had all the qualifications. You spoke for someone who did not have a voice, and that's major.
Absolutely. Well, Trinity, what would be some of your final closing remarks? This is our introduction to our Black History program this month, celebrating Black leaders, legends, and legacies. We're going to pull out the highlights of all kinds of major leaders, leaders that are in our history: Ida B. Wells, Barnett, Madam C.J. Walker, President Barack Obama, Brian Stevenson, and others. But what is it that you would say in your final remarks to invite our listening audience to come back and be with us in every episode of our Black History? Because we're going to learn about people, as Alana said, that have done some major, significant things and made major contributions to U.S. history, to even the whole technology age that we don't know about and that we've not heard about. So we want to educate to emancipate, educate people so they can be free from ignorance and free from wrong way of thinking and free from being paralyzed from doing nothing. What would be your final remarks, Miss Trinity?
Well, one thing that I can say, knowing from where I've grown up and the things that people in my area have said in the past, not knowing how much it affects people, Black people do things. It's not like Black people just sit around and do nothing or just see other people do things and be like, oh, that was cool, and just leave it alone. Black people have invented things that we would not even know, such as Black people invented mac and cheese. And most people don't know that. And that's crazy because the proof of it was given to one of our presidents, one of our white presidents, and he did not invent it.
Share the fact of how the African American cook came up with these wonderful dishes.
Yes, ma'am. I believe the president was George Washington, and he had a Black slave chef named Hercules. It was either Washington or Jefferson. I believe it was Jefferson, actually. And Hercules created the dishes after coming back from France with Jefferson after being trained in those different kitchens. So he came back to the US with all the knowledge he had learned and gained from France and brought those dishes and incorporated those ingredients with ingredients he found here and created dishes like mac and cheese, which were greatly popular, that grew in popularity so much so that it's mass produced today. It's one of the most loved ingredient options and items in most homes, but especially Black homes, because who doesn't know somebody that make a good mac and cheese? Honestly. But it was insane because he had to train his own brother on how to cook for the president so that he could gain his own freedom. And many people don't know that. And many people would give the credit to the president because he's the president.
Yeah, but actually it was the Black man behind the scenes in the kitchen that was making those wonderful meals. And you would know that because you're aspiring to be a chef.
Yes,
and you said that you wanted to use food to bridge the gap to help foster cultural appreciation and build community. And food is like music. It's very neutral. It has a way of drawing the heart of all people.
Yes, ma'am.
This brings us to the close of our first episode of Black History, celebrating Black leaders, legends, and legacies for the month of February. I want to leave you with this quote, the resolve of a history maker. Your best defense against ignorance is a well-informed mind, dogged determination, and relentless engagement. Yours truly. That's what I believe the resolve of a history maker is. You don't make history just because you want to do something to be important. You make history because you do something as making life better for other people. You want to be significant because significance has to do with helping other people. Importance has to do with your individual life. So thank you all for joining us. I appreciate everyone who signed on. I certainly hope that you'll be returning with us. And just remember this, laws can limit where you pray, but they can't stop you from praying, not as a Christian. And no one can cancel Black history or our contributions to American life. It is undeniable. But ignorance is always afraid of change. Let's keep paying it forward. Let's keep standing on the shoulders of those that have come before us so that we can create a ladder extension for those that are coming behind us. And let's keep celebrating Black greats, and let's be a part of those history-making moments in the lives of others. So we're signing off. Thank you for joining Trumpet of God Ministries, Voice of Distinction. You're a part of our inaugural first Black History podcast. And as the Lord says the same, in the future, we're going to be rolling out other information, populating our social media sites with web links and information throughout the month and after Black History Month. We're going to restore the dignity and the memory of Black greats. You're on your way, young ladies, to making history. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless.